Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. How you folks doing? I hope you're doing well. I had a pretty good day. I mean, every day is pretty good up here. I mean, who am I kidding? This daily sauna thing has just changed my life. I'll probably take another one after the podcast. I don't know what it is about a sauna, but it just relaxes you in a way that, I don't know, man. It's just beautiful. So, what am I talking about tonight? Well, I'm going to talk about a lot of things. I titled the pod. Sorry, I titled the podcast "Repo Man," and that's because I just rewatched the movie The Repo Man. Now the curious thing is, I mean, I obviously I download movies, right? I'm a pirate, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not even going to say that. I managed to find movies, right? I don't want to admit to anything. And now I had seen Repo Man when it came out in like 1984. Now, if you don't know the movie, it is a very, very strange movie. And when I first saw it, I did not make much of it. Okay? Now, as I was perusing some places that I sometimes look for stuff to download, I noticed that there was a copy of Repo Man that had been put up. Now, what is interesting about this is it was added to the Criterion collection. Now, if those of you who don't know, I'll just show you briefly here, if you can. Hang on. There you go. So that's the Criterion collection. Now, shop the collection. Now, what is the Criterion collection? It is shop the collection. Now you can buy them. All films, Last Waltz. Okay, so it's basically it started out just as a movie list, like I don't know, like a list of movies, but it's like the very best movies in the world from all over the world. So anything that is considered to be a classic is on the Criterion list. It's part of the Criterion collection. So I mean, we're talking about and it's like there's some movies they overlook, and that's a curious thing in and of itself, like why they overlook certain movies. But I mean, what would be on the Criterion collection? Like Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. And I apologize for using two examples with the number 7 in them. It's purely a coincidence. And it is like the highbrow of the highbrow. It is a list of films that could be curated by the late, great Pauline Kael of The New Yorker, who used to be their movie critic in the 70s and 80s and was considered literally the hardest critic in the business. I mean, she judged cinema the same way you would judge a gallery showing of an artist's new paintings, or the way literary critics in the 70s and 80s went at books. A lot of you who listen to me might be too young to know these things, but literary criticism was one of the fiercest fields in the world. Like, you had to have nerves of steel to publish a book because you had to face the critics. Now, and another curious thing about the time we live in is all of that sort of critical, and I'll call it snobbery, all of that critical snobbery has gone away, right? And that's, again, part of the consumption of the media by consumerism. So just like the normal media doesn't do its job and report on things, the reviewers of cinema weren't doing their job, and the reviewers of books weren't doing their job. And they were, I guess, paid off, or they wanted to be part of the industry, so they would, not get too critical, right? Because if you're a movie critic, you're going to be bumping into the movie stars, the producers, and the directors at film festivals and things like this, right? And it can get quite awkward. And, I mean, back in the day, a brutal review could cost you millions of dollars, when millions of dollars was a lot of money, okay? Like, it could cost you millions of dollars, like, because, VHS didn't really come out until like the late 80s, early 90s, the blockbuster phenomenon, right? Watching movies at home. So people just went to the cinema to see movies. And cinema culture was everywhere. Now every home is a cinema. And my home's no exception. I got a $200 sound system that is external to my $700 50-inch TV, right? And I watch everything off my Mac Mini with an M1 chip. So it's all high resolution. It's literally home cinema, right? But back in the day, everybody went to the cinema, and a bad review could cripple you. Anyways, this is all me leading up to the importance of this Criterion collection, okay? Which has been around for quite, well, Risky Business got added. Rashomon, so there's a classic example, okay? Rashomon, Grand Illusion, Seven Samurai, The Lady Vanishes, A Night to Remember, The Killer. These are all the old ones from the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. But it was a big deal to get on the Criterion collection, and I thought, oh my God, they put Repo Man on the Criterion collection, the Criterion list. So I rewatched it. In fact, I just finished, which is why I'm a bit late starting my podcast tonight. And if you haven't seen the film, do yourself a favor and download it and watch it. Now, I know I say this a lot, okay? But look, my taste is impeccable. It's, I don't know how to describe it. It's just, my taste is impeccable. And if I tell you a film is worth seeing, it's worth seeing. If I tell you a TV series is worth watching, it's worth watching. It's art. I'm not just passing something on to you that will kill some time. I'm passing something on to you that will affect your life. It'll change the way you perceive reality. Okay? And I don't do it often. I don't often say you should watch this. Why do I watch so many films and so much television? Well, I got in the habit of doing this as a writer because for me it's part enjoyment and it's part work. Okay? So when I'm watching a movie, I'm looking at dialogue, I'm looking at really the story structure, and and how they set up the whole story within a 3-act structure, and what they do differently, what they do uniquely. So, for example, the only thing I find interesting about Quentin Tarantino is how he plays with time a little bit, right? Like, it was interesting the way the linear narrative of Pulp Fiction was chopped up and mixed back up together. So it wasn't from beginning to end. You knew certain things in the film that technically in a linear timeline you shouldn't know. There's a reason he did that. There's an artistic reason he did that. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Okay? Now, he overuses it sometimes. Like, it didn't work in The Hateful Eight, where he just like dumps his backstory at the end of the movie. Well, this is what happened before we started the movie. So now you can It was just ridiculous and lazy the way he did it in The Hateful Eight. But it was clever the way he did it in Pulp Fiction. But I don't think Pulp Fiction is a great movie. And I don't think Quentin Tarantino is a great writer or a great director. Okay? A lot of people disagree with me. I think he's just one of these Babylonian Baphomet weirdos. Okay? That's what I think. And they can't produce anything. One of the ingredients of a truly beautifully created thing is beauty. You can't fake beauty. Okay, so I mean, nature has beauty. You saw my backyard. That's my daily. That's what I look at every day when I go to the back of the property. Okay, where the guest house is. What else is beautiful? I don't know. I can't think of anything. They're all books, and you'd never have read them, or they're poets, and you've never heard of them, or you don't know them. And I'm not trying to say that my listening audience is ignorant or anything like that. It's just nobody reads poetry anymore, man. Like, it's a lost art. It's just gone, right? But when I was growing up, it was still a thing for a small group of people. It was like a geeky crowd. Right? And it was more like little Dungeons and Dragons community or something like that. People who read poetry and liked to talk about poetry. I mean, really good poetry. I mean, like William Blake, Wallace Stevens, T.S. Eliot, E.E. Cummings. Great poets. Great books were few and far between, right? Like a great book will change your life. There are books you should read that they will change your life. Okay? Anyways, Repo Man. Repo Man is better timed to be watched in 2024 than when it came out 40 years ago in 1984. It's more relevant today than it was 40 years ago. 40 years ago, it was so far ahead of its time, I don't think a lot of people got it. And the critics kind of didn't know what to make of it either. It got what I would, it got about like anywhere from like a 5, if it was IMDb rated now. Well, I suppose it is. I could look it up, but I mean, based on what the newspaper critics were saying back then, it was about a 5.5 out of 10, right? Not horrible, but like, it was really completely out of place. Let me just take a look here. I'm curious what it was competing with in 1984. I think you're looking at Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, like Out of Africa, stuff like that. Top 50 movies in 1984. This is the best thing about the internet is, the first Terminator came out. Amadeus came out. Once Upon a Time in America. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Ghostbusters. A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is Spinal Tap. Gremlins. The first Beverly Hills Cop. Okay, 40. We just had a Netflix addition to that now, 40 years later. The Karate Kid. They got that on Netflix now, too. Cobra Kai. there something is going on with the creativity of human beings. And this is kind of what Repo Man is about. I see, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it for you. But when I say it's more relevant today than when it came out, it's about what it discusses and what it's about. Okay? So one of the characters in the movie is a Los Alamos scientist who created the neutron bomb. And he's driving around with a Chevy Malibu with 2 dead extraterrestrials in the trunk, and the CIA's looking for him. And he crosses path with a crew of guys that work for a repo company, like they repossess cars. Because to get the car back, which has the dead aliens in it, the intelligence agencies, what we would call maybe in the parlance of our friend Donald Trump, the deep state, they put out a $20,000 bounty on the car, and they send the fax to all the repo companies. Okay. So I won't say too much more than that, but give it a look, okay, and see what you think of it. Now, what I really want to talk about tonight, that was just sort of like a long introduction about a movie I just watched before the podcast, but what I want to touch upon tonight is what I touched upon in the final chapter of the middle part of The Devil and Us, a memoir of you and me. And that's what I called the event horizon. Okay? Now, an event horizon, because I don't want to lead you astray, I look everything up and I read the actual dictionary definition to you. Event horizon definition. It's a noun. The region usually described as spherical, marking the outer boundary of a black hole, inside which the gravitational force is strong enough to prevent all matter and radiation from escaping, including light. Light is a form of matter. Okay, visible light visible by our eyes, okay? Second definition, the boundary surface surrounding a black hole from outside of which nothing inside can be observed. Because nothing inside that surface, even light, can escape beyond it. See also black hole and escape velocity. And the third definition is the gravitational sphere of a black hole within which the escape velocity is greater than the speed of light, causing them to practically stop. So what is an event horizon when used in the colloquial, the way I'm using it tonight in my podcast? Because I'm not using it in the literal. I'm not talking about black holes. So, and an event horizon these days is more often used in the colloquial than it is in the literal. It's become a kind of an expression in the English language that means something. And what it means is we know something is there. Okay? So we know the black hole is there. We can measure it. We can see it. You can see the aspects of it. They're sometimes called, in occult terminology, black holes are sometimes called black suns, which is a collapsed star, a black sun, okay? And if you want to hear a really creepy rendition of that, listen to David Bowie's final album before he died, and he's got a song called Black Sun, and it's super creepy. He basically admits to selling his soul in his early adulthood. Names the place it happened everywhere. I think it was in Amsterdam or something like that, and he was about 21 years old, and he literally talks about this contract he made, which I suspect a lot of people in his generation made a similar contract. So when I say event horizon, what I mean is like we know something is there. Okay? So the way I detailed everything in The Devil in Us, beginning with, the Nazis and the Zionists, that are really the same entity split into two oppositional forces. But if you were to look at that thinking and that way of viewing the world, like there's a super people and everybody else should be subordinate or dead, the Zionists and the Nazis are the same thing. This is what's so comical about the whole thing. They're the same thing, okay? But I don't think what the Nazis really were has been told to us. I think that the Zionists used the Nazis to put their plan and their thinking onto the Nazis because they knew it was in the public consciousness and it provided that false catharsis I told you about. So people, people who think they're better than other people and want to take over the world and murder billions of people don't exist anymore because we defeated the Nazis. That's the utility of the false catharsis in this particular instance. Brilliantly played by our Zionist friends. Never disrespect your opponent. Think of it like a chess match, and it's all a game down here. It's a hologram. Okay? There's nothing really to lose here. You can't lose your soul. I mean, you can make serious mistakes that have you going through a number of negative reincarnations, right? A number of you sent me the Cliff High podcast today. And I watched the last 30 minutes because everybody knows my time is a bit tight. I work, I have family, I podcast, I have a full life, right? And they said, Bruce, you don't have to, it was a 54-minute podcast. You don't have to watch the whole thing, just watch the last half. So that's what I did. I just watched the last half. And Cliff said some very interesting things. And isn't it interesting that this idea that only I've been talking about for 5 years, the Third Temple, when I started going public about my theories about the Third Temple of Solomon in late 2020, people thought I was fucking nuts. Nuts. Okay? And now, it's like the black hole. We know this idea is there, and it's coming up more and more and more and more, right? It's bubbling up into the consciousness. This is being done in a coordinated magical effort. So remember what I told you yesterday about, look, most of you don't even understand. I'll take 2 steps back. I don't want to sound like one of these arrogant Weinstein brothers or like one of these physicists that go on a podcast and call everybody else stupid. I got to avoid doing that. I apologize. It's bad, man. It's bad. And I got to find more inclusive language and more loving ways to express what I'm trying to say. But I'm a little excited today, so I don't know, it sort of inflames my ego a little bit, which most of the time is, perfectly packed away like carry-on luggage on a flight. So, Cliff said a couple of interesting things. First of all, I believe, and I don't want to put words into the man's mouth, but I think he shares my thinking and my feeling on a lot of the New Age and UFO stuff. For example, today he said that, don't listen to channelers. I would agree with that. Now, Cliff talks up psychic ability, but that just could be, I don't. I think do not open your... I've never met a happy psychic. And I worked with 3 of the top ones in the world, John Edmonds, Robert Wiegand, and Andrew Bartzis. Andrew Bartzis is a sociopathic killer, by the way, mass murderer. He's killed a lot of people. He can do it without visiting you, paying somebody to shoot you. He can kill you remotely, and he's killed a lot of people. Why do I bring that up today? Because it's all coming into me now. Okay? It's like you throw your fishing net out, you forget about it. Or you throw your fishing line out with a bob, you forget about it, you relax in your boat, you fall back, you pull your straw hat down, and then boom, boom, boom. When you forgot you're even fishing, something pulls on the line. That's what happens when you put stuff out there, like the Substack blog I put on Bartzis and Ellis out there about a year and a half ago. People are still commenting on that blog, and informed people. Okay, they don't identify themselves, but and people call me, and I'm going to respect their anonymity. But people call me and tell me stories. I had one such conversation today, and yeah, they basically just another kind of serial killer is what we were dealing with in Andrew Bartzis and David Ellis. Black magic serial killers. That's something the world doesn't even know about. We know about psychic assassins and, loosely we know about it from certain podcasters. But these things are all real. There's nothing to worry about if you're spiritually based. If you're spiritually debased, you're in a lot of trouble. This is not a time to be spiritually debased. Once again, I'll take a moment to invite all of you to commence spiritual practice. Okay? Whatever works for you. I'm not advocating any path. I'm not saying, join Mahayana Buddhism, Vipsana Buddhism, Vedic yoga, Ayurvedic medicine, Zen meditation, Catholicism, Torah Judaism, whatever works for you. And we're all different. It's like diet. Some people like potatoes, some people like bread, and some people like rice. But everybody's getting their starch. You see what I'm saying? Okay? But you want to be thinking about purity now? Okay? You want to be thinking about purity? You want to be thinking about thinking less? Not thinking more, thinking less. Okay? Because thought is not what you think it is. Okay? It's better to lead a life with fewer thoughts than more thoughts. Okay? Now, and I realize how counterintuitive that sounds in 2024. With all of the discoveries in science and physics and biology and Elon Musk but this is where I'm going. The event horizon. Okay? So Cliff actually said that there's a Hindu Vedic teaching that states that you shouldn't channel and that it'll create mental illness in future lifetimes. And it's amazing how much synergy is going on now amongst certain podcasters. I said basically the same thing 2 or 3 podcasts ago, except I worded it completely differently. The way I said it was you can create multidimensional karma by opening multidimensional relationships with entities, using the knowledge those entities give you to affect or change your material reality. The karma is created while you're in a body. But it's a special kind of karma that is created by going into other dimensions while you're in a body, using agents, forces, and concepts from those other dimensions to change your fortune in the world, to make money, to seek revenge, to prophesize the future and make yourself look like a holy man to spiritually ignorant people and things like this, right? And that will set you up for a very nasty kind of karma in your future incarnations. Okay? Very nasty kind of karma. So what is the event horizon? We see it's not going to be just another big dust-up like World War I and World War II. And then a reordering of the world, the Chinese take over, sort of managing the world the way America did after World War II. And everybody has to get used to the Chinese coming in and buying lots of property in your country and fucking all your women because the Chinese men are rich. And let's be honest, we did that as North Americans from this. When I first came to Costa Rica in 2002, 9 out of 10 men I met over here were here simply to date beyond their ability to date where they came from. Okay, and some of them for what I call recreational monogamy with an endless string of partners 25, 30 years younger than them. I personally find that a bit disgusting, but everybody to their own. Okay, I don't want to judge anybody, each to their own. Okay, but if you're a 55, 60-year-old man and you're still behaving that way, you got some splaining to do. There's something that didn't grow up in you. Okay, and I'm not judging it. Okay, you know, those of you who've read the Devil in Us know. I mean, I grew up in, rooming houses and by the month welfare hotels. I mean, getting a blowjob for me from about 17 to 26 was about as easy as buying a popsicle at 7-Eleven. I would be living in a hotel where 8 or 9 prostitutes lived. They were my friends, okay? I lived with them. When you live with people, there's no judgment. You're not looking down. And they like that because everybody else that they suck off for money, they hate their clients. They hate them, okay? Because the clients usually make them feel stupid. It's just a weird thing. So I was in situations that most people don't find themselves in, which, because of those experiences, I was inoculated or immunized against any honey traps I might find in my 30s or 40s or 50s, because I got it all out of my system. So I'm not judging, okay? I'm not judging. So everybody is speculating now on what this event horizon is. Are any of you aware of a concept that Terence McKenna put forward? It wasn't just a concept. It was the product of running the I Ching, which is a Chinese book of divination. Very powerful book, by the way, the I Ching. It's a companion to the Taoist system. And it's a system of divination. You roll coins like in a can, and then you turn it over, and then you read the coins a certain way. And it pivots off of hexagrams that are three sticks that can either be up or sideways, and they come in groupings of 4. So there's 4 coins. Okay? Now, the maximum number of probable outcomes for the system mathematically is 64. Okay? So if you think about it, and you got to do a little bit of your own research here, because I'm not going to do it justice just explaining it off the top of my head. But it's actually what the I Ching is a system of divination that is a binary, meaning 0 or 1, a Boolean system, just like computers, 64-bit. Okay? 64-bit Boolean system of divination, which is what most of us have for our computers at home now. Okay? Quantum computers haven't made it into the general market, and they probably will not. Okay? So what happens next is there's nowhere left for us to go as a human race in this material paradigm. The next step, the event horizon, is direct experience and participation. If the next revolution in the human race is not spiritual, we're finished. We're not going to make it. We're going to get destroyed, and we're going to have to start over. Okay? And that happens on this planet too. Okay? It happens. Okay? So I don't think it's going to happen this time. I think we're going to go through. I think we're going to thread the needle. And all of these, some of the information in these New Age ramblings that have come out in the last 15 or 20 years are worth taking a look at. You know, a lot of them are pretty nonsensical, pretty ridiculous. I find Dolores Cannon fucking ridiculous. George Green, the Palladian contactee, is fucking ridiculous. But the general idea is that a lot of souls were born into this world beginning in the mid-60s to raise the vibration to get us through the threshold of this event horizon so that we could pass by, continuing metaphorically, I'm not speaking literally here, so we could pass by the front of this black hole and not get sucked in. Okay? So this is what's going on now. This is the event horizon. And it's absolutely fascinating. Okay? Now, Repo Man, let me see if I can find anything for you here on Repo Man, because you got to see a few of the scenes. But I was just blown away when I found out it made it onto the Criterion list, okay? You know, it's something on par, you know, like Britney Spears being invited to the Sydney, Australia Opera House to sing with the orchestra. Okay? I mean, it's not like it doesn't happen. I think Bono has done that, but it never works because their voice shouldn't be there. The only voices that should be there are a baritone opera singer like Pavarotti, or a soprano like Dawn Upshaw, or somebody like that. You don't want to hear some cranky rock and roll pop singer with an opera. And that's how the Repo Man getting into the Criterion list first struck me, okay? But let me see if I can find something, because there's some gems of a scene. Okay. Here's a video, but I don't think it's really that important. Repo Man. The Miller scenes are the best. Okay, so he's a character in the movie. Repo Man Miller. Sorry, I don't like to do this. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's one at the end here. Yeah, okay, you know what? I'm going to play this, actually, because somebody's doing a structural semiotic analysis of the last scene in Repo Man. Let's take a look at this.
Spin. But you don't know how to drive.
Don't go. What about our relationship?
What?
What about our relationship?
Fuck that.
You shithead! I'm glad I tortured you. How could you leave me? I'm the one who's supposed to be in that car.
Best goddamn car in the yard.
Wow.
intense. Life with Repo Man is always intense.
I had to unmute there. Yeah, sorry, that didn't quite do what I thought it was going to do in terms of explaining things to you. Anyways, let me get back to what I'm trying to say tonight, okay? Now, I've heard a lot of crackpot shit in the last 10 years, okay? I've heard so much crackpot shit, it's unbelievable, okay? The psychic serial killer Andrew Bartz has had a lot of crackpot shit to say, okay? We're going to 5D. Well, I want you to stop and think about that for a second. Okay, what would 5D be? Knowledge of the past, knowledge of the future, and the ability to telepathically communicate with people, a higher understanding of the meaning of life. There would be no need for these bodies in 5D. I've always viewed 5D as a euphemism for mass death. Any time somebody starts talking about 5D or something like that, I always think of death. Like that's the only thing that they could be talking about, like you're going to die. Because I've met people living in 5D consciousness. I can achieve 5D and beyond in my meditative states. But I'm kind of glad that it all doesn't come back into my waking state. That it's this consciousness experiment I've been involved in my whole life through meditation and spiritual practice has not subsumed me. Okay? Now it may, in the last 30 years of my life, I think I'll go to 87 or 88. It may, but I just don't see any value in it because you're here in a body and there's a great adventure to being alive. And I say this, I'm going to segue into another topic that I've never really fully explained on my podcast, but I hint at it all the time. And to be honest with you, I get these ideas for fuller explanation talking off air to Santo, right? And he says, you need to explain that more because, I don't quite understand what you're meaning. And if Santo doesn't get it, probably most of or all of the listeners are not getting it. So I have an obligation to know things. Now, most of the people I've met outside of serious meditation and spiritual groups that have no public presence, don't do podcasts, but this group of people that is out on the internet, Gaia, Matthias DeStefano, the Akashic reader at Gaia, all of those Gaia people, Andrew Bartzis, all of these so-called healers. Some of them are real healers. This is a topic I have to be very careful with, okay? Some of them are real healers. But most of them are selling a process of opening your consciousness to more power, which is psychic ability. And when somebody says to me, Bruce, do you think that's good? I say no. And they say, why? And I say, well, why do you want it? What about life at your present state of consciousness without your psychic centers open are you not enjoying? What more do you think you're going to get out of life with your psychic centers open? How many psychics have you known? Now, this is not something that I have figured out on my own, although I will admit my early studies and my early meditation teachers taught me that there's a big difference between psychic awakening and spiritual awakening, and to not deliberately try to open your psychic centers. And if they accidentally open as a consequence of your spiritual practice, shut them back down, because they're only going to create misery for you. They're like those three witches on the beach at the beginning of Macbeth. So What is the joy of living life if you know everything that's going to happen? What's what is there for you to get out of life? Okay? I mean, if we're here to grow spiritually and graduate from this domain, and graduation is death, by the way. Okay? You go to another form. You persist in your individuality. You don't necessarily merge back with Source yet, but you can go into Source when you need to and get recharged, because that's where all the energy is in God. God is another way of saying free energy, but it's free energy for everything, not just to power a house or drive a car. It's free energy for everything, for the plants, for the minerals, for the fish, for the sun, for the stars, for the solar system. All of the energy working in this reality is a product of God. All of it. Okay? Some people give me a hard time for continuing to use the word God, and they have a case. I'm not going to say they don't, okay? But I continue to use the word God because the one thing that's gone good about that word is it's been charged with so much love and respect. And that's the state of being that you want to be in to approach Source, to approach the Creator. Okay? I have yet to meet a psychic who has had or is having a good life. It is a more miserable life than the saint's life. And most of the saints, if they go public, are tortured and murdered. Saints are never lifted up on people's shoulders in their time. And you know why? Because most of what saints say is quite critical. Because they know everything, they see everything, right? So in India, they have the habit of not criticizing anything happening in the public space. There's also a kind of a perfect intuitive separation between spirituality and politics and governance in India. They don't need to write it down on paper like the U.S. Constitution, separation of church and state. Okay? But if a saint does speak to something, it's never good for the person they're speaking to or about. Okay? Because they're just pointing out that the person is completely corrupt. And then if that person is a potentate in that incarnation and has the power, they have the saint beheaded. You know how many holy people have been killed in the history of holy peoples on this planet? You know, even the Quran says that over 120,000 messengers of the divine have come to the earth, meaning that even Islam recognizes that this desire of the Creator to communicate with the human race pre-exists Islam, and it's a function of this reality. Okay? About 80, 90, or 90% of them have been horribly murdered. And I mean horribly murdered. Like a domestic, where the husband chokes the wife, or the wife stabs the husband 20 times. All that pent-up, passionate energy. It's like that. That's how they kill the saints. So you got to wonder. So you don't want to open up your psychic centers. You want divine intuition. Okay? I came here to the Talamanca Mountains guided by divine intuition. The product of what I've achieved here is beyond anything I could have designed or planned with my mind. Okay? Even with heightened psychic abilities. If heightened psychic abilities would have just screwed everything up. You never want that stuff. And yet everybody I meet, like 99 out of 100 people who claim to be on path and engaged in spiritual unfoldment, really, they have no interest in God. And they're just trying to increase the number of different groups of races and entities they communicate with. Okay? It's a very tricky thing to do. And you're invariably going to create this kind of funky karma I talk about. And it could manifest in a number of different ways. I think Cliff, paraphrasing the Vedic teachings, that you will experience several lives of mental illness is probably true as well, It's another thing you learn on path, is never feel sorry for anybody. You can be moved by people. You can have your heart moved, but never ever fall into a sympathy trap. Okay? There's people who live on that energy. They put themselves out there in a constant state of, oh, I'm getting attacked. I've been attacked again. Why won't this stop? And you just want to shake them and say, well, you're doing it. You're doing it. But you can't, because it would hurt their feelings, and, you know, we live in a polite society, and you just can't do that, right? But there's always a reason you're getting attacked, and nobody can figure it out more than you. And everything can be figured out. Sometimes you need a little bit of help. I don't think I would have unraveled my family curse problem and the really funky karma I had in this lifetime without Bob's help. Okay? So sometimes you need a little help, but that's earned as well. I get that help because of spiritual merit. You understand? And then you have to pay that back in some way, shape, or form. So we're on the cusp of some kind of unbelievable event horizon now. I don't know what's going to happen with this war. I woke up, my wife never follows the news. I woke up this morning, she says, there's a war that started, and I found out that Iran is attacking Israel, and that the ballistic missiles are landing. The Iron Dome can't stop those missiles. It can maybe, I think, just stop the small missiles that Hezbollah and Hamas have, right? The firecrackers. But when you get into ballistic missiles, these missiles are hitting residential areas of Israel now. So we're basically October 9th. We're one moon away from the federal election. Okay? The only force accelerating this is Israel, because they know Trump, or the dark forces in Israel, because I think Trump will bring a swift end to the conflict. And I told you how he's going to do it. He's going to get right to the chase, man, and cut to the chase. And what is it? What is Trump? What would be the ultimate crown in Trump's career as a land developer in New York and around the world? Because he's built towers all over the world. Toronto, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. There's a Trump Tower in Panama City. That's the only one in Central America. That's the only construction Trump's done down here in Central America. What would be the ultimate coup, the ultimate credit to this Hiram Abiff architectural reputation that I just told you the answer if you're literate, but it's the Third Temple. That's like a wet dream for Donald Trump. He's a builder. And the Temple of Solomon is considered the foundation of architectural sciences in an esoteric sense. Okay? And people overlook that Trump is basically a builder. In fact, with all of this crazy affixing different personas onto Trump, some people call him the Messiah. I heard that they put the silver crown on his head. 167 Chabad rabbis put the crown on his head, and he was crowned the Messiah. Messiah doesn't have to be a Jew, by the way. Although Trump might be a Jew, I don't know. Or he may. I know he studied the Kabbalah. In his first term, he was compared to King Cyrus, I think the Iranian leader who made peace with Israel and protected them from some of their enemies and stuff. But probably the closest analogy to Trump in religious literature is Hiram Abiff, who is the architect of the Temple of Solomon, and probably did a lot of the Egyptian architecture as well. Cliff, and I don't mean to talk about somebody else's podcast on my podcast, but Cliff said some really interesting things today that when you hear it spoken out loud, you go, holy shit, why didn't I ever think of that? And the thing he said today is, don't you find it a bit curious that all of these Hebrew scriptures were written and they escaped Egypt and everything and all of this, and they don't talk about the pyramids at all. And it is a curious thing that there's no mention of the pyramids in any of the Torah. But that stuff would have been written around the time that those pyramids existed. It's a very curious thing when you think about it, isn't it? That's about it for tonight. So if you get a chance, watch Repo Man. And stay healthy, stay good. And we'll see you again tomorrow night. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has